Hello, guys. We are just booking right along. We are ready for Act 1, Scene 3. So we're going to meet Juliet. We're going to meet, we've already seen Juliet's mom, but we're going to get more information about her. And we're going to meet the nurse. So we got some background context that you need to understand. Juliet's nurse is not like her nurse who takes care of her medically. She is called her nurse because Juliet's nurse would have been her wet nurse. And a wet nurse would have been hired to breastfeed a baby. So, Lady Capulet, Juliet's mom, she would have been like of a higher social caliber. She would have been a wealthy lady who was raised to be not necessarily a mom, more of like a trophy wife. And so it was common practice for those upper crust ladies to hire someone to breastfeed their children. They didn't necessarily do it themselves. In fact, it would have been pretty shocking had they chosen that. So that's where your nurse comes in. I was surprised with the first lesson that I did, the intro, that no one put what surprised them was the fact that none of Shakespeare's actors at the Globe were women. It was not allowed. In fact, they made it illegal for women to be actors because women were supposed to be like pure and innocent, and they shouldn't be doing such a base, dirty thing like pretending to be someone that they weren't. That was not allowed. So all of your actors, including Juliet, would have been played by a man. Juliet would have been played by a young boy whose voice hadn't changed. So it was relatively high, and they would have, dressed that person in a dress and all that business. Of course, watching a movie or watching TV or all of that, even seeing a stage production, it's all about suspension of disbelief. We know it's not really happening. We know it's not real. So we just pretend. So if the actor is good enough, you can pretend that it's a real Juliet, a real girl on that stage. And with the nurse's character, because she's so comical and funny, they would have chosen like the oldest, ugliest man in the company of the actors, and he would have played the nurse. Like preferably somebody with like a full beard, because the nurse, like every time she talks, they want you to think that she's like ugly and just like horrendously. You would not want to look at her. But she's also older definitely than Juliet's mom. So, okay, I'm not going to go through much of the lines. Just please make sure you noticed how comfortable Juliet is with a nurse and how stiff and formal she is with her mom. So Juliet would have spent nearly all of her time with a nurse and very little of her time with her mom. And it was just the way it was. So Juliet definitely sees her nurse as her mother figure. She's the one she's going to rely on and confide in. And her mom's, like, it's a much more formal relationship. Okay, so I am on page 2, and I do want to bring you, point out some of the funny stuff that happens in the scene, because almost everything that the nurse says is funny. Okay, so actually, I'm not going to start with the funny stuff. Okay, so the nurse and Juliet's mom are like arguing about how old Juliet is, and the nurse says, I'm on again page 2. Come Lammas Eve at night, shall she be 14? So, Juliet's birthday is in like 2 weeks, a fortnight. So she's almost 14. And the reason that the nurse was able to breastfeed Juliet, she would have had to have had a baby, obviously, to have breast milk. The nurse says, Susan and she, God rest all Christian souls, were of an age. Well, Susan is with God. She was too good for me. So the nurse's daughter Susan died as an infant, or I mean, I think she was live born, but she died very young as an infant, and that's why the nurse was able to be Juliet's wet nurse, because she still had breast milk. And even though the nurse has gone through these really tragic things in her life, she still has such a positive outlook on life, and she says, yeah, my daughter died, but then she says, she was too good for me. So, like, she's with God. It's okay. And she just moves right on. And, okay, so then it goes in the funny stuff to lighten the mood. If you think your parents' stories about you as a baby are embarrassing, you haven't met the nurse, because the nurse remembers how old Juliet is, because she's talking about the day that Juliet was weaned, that she no longer breastfed. And the nurse remembers it so fondly because she put wormwood on her breast, and so it tasted bad when Juliet tried to feed from her, tried to suckle. And so, yeah, if you think your parents' stories are embarrassing, you have no idea. At least they don't tell stories about your breastfeeding. Okay, and then later on this same page, the nurse says, and then my husband, God be with his soul. So her husband has died as well. Like, she has had a lot of loss in her life, but she still has just such a positive outlook on life. She's such a cheerful, fun character. Okay, so throughout this whole page, it's all the nurse talking almost. And she's like, oh, quit talking. Oh, quit talking. Oh, quit talking. And then she keeps talking, because that's just the way she is. And she's like, on page 3, she says, yes, I'll quit talking. And then she tells another story about how Juliet fell, and more embarrassing stuff. The husband says, when you get older, Juliet, you'll not fall on your face, you'll fall on your back, won't you? Which is a hint about, like, women deserve that position. That's where they belong, like conceiving and having babies. And then little baby Juliet quit crying, and she said, yes, I will, because she had fallen and hurt herself. So anyway, okay, have another little dirty joke. Okay, so you have all the nurses' little chatter in the background, and then you have Lady Capulet's trying to ask her daughter, like, this really serious question. And the really serious question is, would you be interested in marrying Paris? But Lady Capulet is very uncomfortable with this conversation. They don't have a lot of, like, very personal interaction between the two of them, Juliet and her mom. So it's hard for her. And the nurse says at the bottom of page 4, like, Paris is a pretty good-looking man. He's a man of wax. They could make a statue out of him. And Lady Capulet's agreeing, yeah, he is. He's a good one. And then the nurse has I'm on page 4. Like, her mom's like, if you get married to him, like, you'll have a better, higher social standing, and, it's a good move for you. And then you'll make yourself no less. So by having him, you'll be moved up in the world. And then the nurse says, no less, nay, bigger. Women grow by men, because women get pregnant and make babies when they have a man. And then Lady Capulet's like, please, God, can this be over? And she says, speak briefly. Let's get to it. Can you like of Paris? Can you like of Paris's love? So can you like Paris? And Juliet says, well, I'll give it a shot. I'll look at him, but she sounds a little bit like Romeo here. Like, she doesn't know exactly how to answer the question, but she doesn't want to directly disobey her mom. So she says, well, I'll look at him. And if looking at him can make me love him, then I guess I'll try. When Peter the servant comes in, everything's crazy downstairs. Like, they're calling for the nurse. They're calling for you. They were looking for Juliet, like, let's get a move on. And Lady Capulet says, we follow thee, so we'll follow you, Peter the servant. Juliet, Paris is waiting for you, and nurse says, go girl, seek happy nights to happy days. And so we've met Juliet. We've gotten a little bit of a glimpse of her personality. Definitely a quiet girl. Definitely not talking as much as the nurse. We've found out a little more about Lady Capulet, and we've set up the fact that Lady Capulet wants to see a marriage between Paris and Juliet, or at least she knows her husband does, and so she's not going to stand in the way. And then we're set right up for Act 1, Scene 5, when Romeo and Juliet meet for the first time. So I'll see you in a second.